Welcome, everyone, to the Leadership in Quarters podcast, the interview series, where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Selden, and today's guest is Dr. Carrie Graham. Carrie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Josh. Thank you for having me. I am, in fact, a adult learning and training and development expert, and I have worked with businesses, particularly middle managers in multiple industries. And so after 25, almost 30 years of working, I'd like to say I have quite a plethora of experiences, tools, and recommendations to share with people.
Perfect. That sounds really exciting. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right in. You did mention that a lot of what you've done has been around learning. Can you explain to everybody what an organizational learning culture is and how we build that?
Yeah, so textbook definition is organizational learning is one in which the organization as a whole learns together. So the culture has prioritized the value of learning. It makes it accessible, it makes it coherent as well as comprehensive, and everyone at every level is engaged in the learning, as opposed to a learning organization, which that's an organization simply that focuses on building products around learning.
Hmm.
So it's the organizational learning. We're in this as a collective.
And I think that's so interesting. And actually, my last guest, Dan Nornberg, also talked more about kind of building capability as a collective as opposed to an individual. What do you see the benefits are having a learning organization that's built around the collective as opposed to focusing on the individual as they try to learn?
When you take that approach, you are focusing on the group. So you are acknowledging the value of each individual, but you're valuing their contributions to the larger group. And so if you are focused solely on the individual, you're gearing all of your training materials on one person alone, independent of others. But when you do it as a collective, you've got community learning, organizational learning, and you're inviting people to share their stories, share their experiences with one another, and it also contributes to peer learning. So for organizations that are looking to build trust, this is one way. It's not the only way, but this is one way to build organizational trust or employee trust.
So, in your experience, how do you get organizations to make the jump to become an organizational learning culture? I feel like in the organizations that I've been a part of and the businesses I've been a part of, it's very tough to see beyond the day to day and invest in learning. What have you seen people do successfully to jump to that next step and say, we are going to focus on this as a collective?
It really starts at the top. And when I say at the top, I mean it starts with the vision of the organization, reviewing the vision and the mission of the organization, but also having the leadership take an objective view or assessment of how are we learning as a whole? How are we supporting learning as a whole? And when you do, that's when you start to find the gaps. And so, to your question, it requires you still identifying what the gaps are first and foremost. How are we missing the mark? And the only way that you can identify how you're missing the mark is if you are doing an objective assessment of what you have, whatever it may be. You have to look at it through clear eyes, and that will help you then make the next step, which is filling those gaps.
Do you see it as more beneficial to do this type of work ahead of creating maybe the master plan or the strategy? Or do you see more people do what you just said, where once you have your master plan and your strategy and your direction that you're going, then you see how this plays into what you've already planned?
First off, I would say it should be done concurrently. Sometimes that's not always possible. And I acknowledge that for a number of factors. That may not be possible, but in an ideal situation, what you want to do is do that process concurrently. So while you are looking at what you currently have, you should also be reviewing how does it connect with our vision and our mission? Are our vision and our mission still current and appropriate for where the organization is in today's time? And so when you are doing them concurrently, you have the opportunity to engage in an iterative process. So you spend some time on one, you review the other. You spend some time over there, you go back. And that is really how you solidify how your organization is functioning from a strategic perspective. And sometimes people would think that, oh, using an iterative process, it's just haphazard. And I say no. As someone with a doctorate in adult learning, I say no, because iteration, there is a clear process and procedure that you take for that. It isn't, in fact, haphazard. So I say do it concurrently.
Now, Dr. Graham, if you can, I'd like to go back to trust. I feel like trust in an organization is hugely important. I always say it's the foundation. And if that doesn't exist, then just like a house's foundation, the house would come down and so would our organization. Can you explain a little more how the focus on organizational learning and focusing on learning in general does build that trust in an organization and in the leadership?
This is something that I've seen over the years, over 2 decades actually, is someone will create a training, a learning experience in a vacuum, basically in their head, put it on paper, and they just serve it up to their audience. It doesn't give consideration to who the people are, what their experiences are, what their goals or drive is, the current industry, the organization. It doesn't account for any of that. It is
Right.
simply, I have information and here it is. That's a surefire way to minimize trust. And it's because you are not accounting for all of those factors, nor are you articulating those factors. However, organizations that have strong training and development and learning and development cultures, what they've done is they assess each individual in the organization to the best of their ability. They match that with what's happening within our organizational culture. Do we have a change in leadership? Have we undergone a merger? What's happening in our industry? What's happening in current affairs? What is the impact of those things on the people who will receive the training? What adjustments do we need to make to the training so that people can actually learn? People are actually engaged. When you do that, when companies look at it from a global perspective, an audience member, an employee cannot sit through that and not feel some level of trust in the person facilitating it. Wow, my company really cares. They know that our community just had some tragic event and they're not forcing us to just push through and ignore what's happening in our community. They're taking time to acknowledge. So there are many ways of how to do it, but it is felt and it is seen by the people who sit through those trainings. Josh, I want to just say this really quick. We have all seen that quote floating around for the last 15, if not 20 years. Employees don't leave their job. They leave because of poor management. Part of that is a lack of trust or a dismantling of trust. And it is a contributing factor when managers speak at, they're not attending to who are the people? Who are they truly? And from a learning perspective, it's who are they as learners? And are you equipping yourself as a manager to be trained to support them as human beings?
I think that's so interesting that you say that because I feel like when you think of learning, you think of the person who's teaching and sharing the capability and the knowledge with a group. How do we go about making effective teachers for this learning process?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And it's so important. It's so important. One of the practices that I've used with my clients is what I define as an ERA process. And what that means is we focus on engagement and not entertainment, but rather engaging your audience in a way that matters to them, not matters to you, but in a way that matters to them. The next thing is retention. Have you built or presented your content in a way that they can actually retain it? I watch all the time on the History Channel how to build bridges. All the time I watch it, but no one wants me to build a bridge because I can't remember. I don't think I know a bolt versus a nail, all of that. But
Right.
nevertheless, you want to help them retain the information, and that requires comprehension. And then the last part is application. We often learn things and we walk away from those trainings and we think, that's great. I don't know how to use that. I don't know how to apply it. And so for people who want to improve their training skill set or their facilitation skill set, I encourage you to use the ERA method and then also become a facilitator, not a teacher, not an instructor, but rather a facilitator of adults who are ready to learn. And that's it. There's a big difference there.
I love to hear your opinion on how you go and understand who your audience is now that you have your trainer or your facilitator doing the training. And I guess in theory, your training deck will always be your constant.
Yeah.
But as somebody who's worked in multiple states for the same company, I've worked in Pennsylvania, I've worked in Missouri, I've worked in North Carolina. They all have different cultures. And I can
Yes.
have the same training deck, but I feel like what I've learned is I need to approach the training differently in every place because of my audience. How do you put your that work in on the front end to really understand who you're doing the training with to make sure that it is an effective training?
I'll give you two examples. One, if you've got a longer amount of time, or two, if you're just stepping in to
Mm,
facilitate. So in the first case, let's say you know that you have a training that you're going to facilitate a few months in advance. You can use the time as you're planning to survey and not just, hey, how's it going? But rather a well-structured quantitative survey. Use that. You can also connect, get out of your office, get out of your space, and have conversation with people around what their needs are, what are they struggling with in terms of as it relates to the training. So there are multiple things that you can do, but you want to get that information from them. You need to hear their voices so that you can understand how best to plan. When you are simply jumping in, so if you've been hired or contracted to facilitate a training, which I have many times, I do gather as much information in advance from the host. But one of the things that I do is I get there early and I casually mingle. Hey, how's it going? What's going on? How's your morning so far? What work is left at your desk or left in your place while you're here? Getting a sense of what they're bringing to that hour, half day, full day event, that immediately should help give you a sense of how best to frame what it is that you're presenting. For example, same thing, had the content ready to go. I'm mingling. And this one woman just looks distraught. And I was like, hey, good morning. How are things going? And she says, my kids overslept, and so they were late getting to school. I got stuck in traffic. I got a flat tire on the way, and I've got some staffing issues. That clued me in. Here's someone who is stressed. And now I'm supposed to facilitate this training. And there were some other things that other people said. And so instead of me opening with, this is our agenda for today, I opened with, let's all just take a breath. Let's all take a couple deep breaths, get our bearings, and calm and prepare. And that alone was enough to get us started. Because what that did, Josh, is it showed them like, oh, she was contracted in to facilitate for us, but she sees me. She's acknowledging that, you know what, we've got some craziness happening in our departments right now. So
right.
When you do that, it serves many purposes. And ultimately, the goal is that your audience feels and believes that they are being seen and understood. That's how you get them engaged. That's how you get them engaged. And when people are engaged, they remember because they're motivated. And when they
Right.
remember, they apply it.
I think that's something that everybody overlooks so much. They think I'm the trainer, I'm going to walk in, everybody's here to see me and listen to me, and they have it backwards. They disregard the audience, and at the end of the day, it's all about the audience and the trainers
Absolutely.
providing a service.
Absolutely. And sometimes I've had to share with my clients, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to say this, but I have to say this. It's not about you. It's just not about you. It's not about any of us when it comes to facilitating learning, especially for adults. It is about what do they bring? How can we fill the gaps that they have? And that's
Right.
it. That's
Right.
it.
So, Dr. Graham, I feel like we've talked a lot about the preparation and making sure we have an effective training. The next thing that I think of in this conversation that we've had is what does the continuous improvement cycle look like for training? And we prepare, we execute the training. Normally, at least the trainings that I've been a part of, you have that feedback sheet, or I've seen a lot of people use QR codes and everything now. Give me your feedback survey. And now we have feedback. What does that cycle look like where now, as the trainer, the facilitator, we say, okay, what do we need to do to improve this for the next group?
I'm one, so thankful that you included feedback in there. I want to encourage us to go back just a bit, review what your survey or your tool, your assessment tool, what it is. So a Likert scale is always good, but if it is simply, did you enjoy it? Yes or no? Did it meet the objectives? Yes or no? That's not really providing good information. So
Right.
you want to start with an assessment tool or survey tool that is giving you information that you can use in the future. You want to have a mix of open-ended questions and closed questions for a host of reasons. But now that you have the feedback, what I see happens, Josh, is okay, yep, we checked the box, got the feedback. I'm going to go on to the next thing. And we don't analyze the information. And that's the critical part is you have to analyze it. It's not enough to simply look at it and make assumptions about what things mean, but rather if you're using the same tool the last couple of times, you need to make comparisons over time at what has changed, how has the audience changed? Has the audience changed, but the results are the same? That's information. So you want to take a deep dive into analysis of your feedback. And if you are not analyzing it, you need to. And always know it's not an assumption about your character. Reading the feedback can be challenging, but that's not what it is. And that's not what it's for. So look at it when you're ready, when you are emotionally ready, do that analysis and then make your improvements off of the analysis.
Right.
It's critical. It's critical. And it should happen on a continuous cycle.
It
Yeah,
reminds me of a book I just read called The Four Agreements. And one of the agreements is don't take things personally. And so that's exactly what, as leaders and as teachers and trainers and facilitators, that's something we have to understand because none of us are perfect. There's a good chance whatever we go and do and teach and train, there's some kind of improvement. And you got to just accept it and understand, or else why do we train in the first place if it's not landing?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I've spoken on this a couple of times about the challenge of reading the feedback. There was definitely a time in my life where I would agonize. I don't want to do it. I don't want to get the assessment because I don't
Right.
want to analyze it. And to your point, you have to get over it. Sometimes for some, it may require some counseling. They also require some mentorship around what do I do with this information? How do I interpret it? How do I share the information and keep my job? We
Right.
don't lie, we don't bend the truth, but rather this is a limitation that I have and I want to get better, but I keep getting a comment or a slight about it. So you have to look at it. You just got to do
Yep. Rip the band-aid off, right?
it. Yeah. Yeah. No matter how stuck on there it is, you just you'll grow hair back.
That's right. I feel like I have my own bias on how I would analyze information like this, and I have in the past. What is the most effective way to analyze the feedback, especially as we look at training with a collective and not an individual? Because I have to imagine, I always tell people in my organization, you're never going to make everybody happy. And so if you're training a group of 20 people and you get feedback and you've got some themes and some trends and you've got some individual insights, do you always go with the majority of the feedback, or do you see that there are things that maybe only one or two people have said that are impactful enough that you go, okay, I should really include this in my future trainings?
I'm going to say yes, and because oftentimes there are some people who view providing feedback as an opportunity to share what they see. And in those instances, I encourage you to think about, okay, how does that comment or those two comments, how do they fit with the other themes? Right. And sometimes there is a way that it fits. The fit might be that it's totally different. Like that tells a story. And so it's our responsibility to figure out if they say you didn't touch on this topic, did I? Perhaps it's the way I talked about it. Are there people in the audience who already knew that information? So they understood what I was saying. Or let me put this on the to-do list for a potential additional lunch and learn or something like that. So I'm a firm believer, and even from a research methodology research perspective, every data point tells a story. And it's our responsibility as we're interpreting the data of what do we do with it? We can choose to ignore it, but also that then has an impact. Like it all has an impact. What we pay attention to has an impact. So I love that you raised that point, but I always encourage people to think about it. Just dig deep. And you may not include it, but at least be mindful that those feedback points exist. The
Sure.
other thing that I want to encourage you to do, if you get trends and themes that are showing up, but for whatever reason you intentionally choose to not include them, I encourage you to share that information at the next iteration of your training. Hey, thank you all for being here. This is a repeat of last year's session. Last year, there was this feedback and we value it, but it wasn't included because X, Y, and Z. Or this year's training is 5 minutes longer because we got this feedback and we want to make sure that we address it. Or we've removed something and replaced it with another. Sharing the results from your feedback, it's equally important, especially for adult learners.
That's so important because sharing the why with people is, again, it gets back to trust. And even twofold, if it's the same group, great, because they feel heard and they're like, hey, I gave you feedback and you did something with it. Or if you didn't, you told me that you analyzed it, you looked at it. It wasn't
Yep.
me wasting time giving you feedback. And if it's a new group, you're now sending a message that says, when I ask you for feedback, I'm going to do something with it. And so when you explain the why, it has such an impact on the trust that you build. And that's a great way, I think, that you brought up that you can build that trust right off the bat, whether it's a new group or an existing group. And it's something I feel like people take for granted. And they think I'm in this position, whether it's a general leadership position or a facilitator position, I am the center of this event and I don't need to go explain myself.
Right. And that happens. It happens when you've been in that position for a while. It happens when you have some levels of insecurity that you brought to this current role. And as you said, we are all human and not any one of us is perfect. However, it is all an opportunity for growth. And if we look at it from that perspective, that's where the beautifulness happens, quite frankly. It's when you look within and can say, I'm not getting this right. And when you're able to acknowledge that publicly, you don't have to demean your work, but say, hey, this isn't a strong suit of mine. I know I'm the in-house facilitator, but for this part, I'm going to bring in so and so.
Right.
because I'm just not strong in this area. Again, it's how you build trust and it enriches the training. It enriches it. So important.
On the topic of feedback, how do you encourage people to give that feedback? And I think it's, in my opinion, it's easy when it's like this quick 1 hour training. You've got people, they're still energized. But these like 2 to 3 day trainings that you have, and generally you ask for feedback at the end when everybody sat through 2 or 3 days straight of training, how do you really encourage them to give effective feedback?
First, if that's the situation, I encourage you to embed feedback throughout. There are so many ways in which you can gauge feedback, whether it's, hey, let's do a quick review of X and Y information, a polling tool, or what have you. Did it make sense the way I explained it? One question. Yes, no, that gives you enough feedback, but embed the feedback throughout so that they are accustomed to, oh yeah, I need to keep providing feedback during, make those quick changes as need
Mhm.
be, and at the end, it should be an easy ask. I wouldn't wait until these are my closing remarks, and please remember to fill out your survey. No, hey, we've got about an hour before we end. Can we all just take a quick break? Go ahead and fill out that feedback. If they've sat through it for 2 or 3 days, I can't imagine what magical will happen in that last hour. So embed it throughout so that you're getting the feedback.
I love that because that is us as facilitators being proactive because
Absolutely.
the feedback at the end is an output measure. You can't do anything with it, like you said. If it's at the last hour or what I've experienced, personal story, I'm tired. I sat through all this training. It's 4 o'clock on day three, and I get to go home after this. And you ask for my feedback, I'm going to fill that out real quick, and it may not be effective. So I think your approach there is so important because not only is it proactive and it allows you to pivot if need be or change things through the training, but it also allows the training group to still be energized as they're giving you that feedback.
Absolutely. When I started doing that, it really changed things for me. And I've helped other people do that as well. And it has really turned things around pretty quick. So it's good practice.
So before we wrap up, do you have any closing remarks or anything for the group?
A couple things I would say with love, remember it's not about you. It's not about any one of us. And importantly, remember to engage in ways that are meaningful to your audience, help them retain the information, and make sure that they know how to apply the information. If that's the only thing people take away from it, just please do use that approach and reach out to me if you need some help.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just a reminder to everybody, Dr. Carrie Graham. We'll have all of her information in the description of the YouTube episode. I'll have her bio in there and I'll have her contact information in case you all want to get a hold of her. You can obviously reach the episode at YouTube at Leading Quarters, my Instagram page at Leading Quarters, and then you can contact me if you have any questions or want to get a hold of Dr. Carrie Graham after this, and it's leadingquarters@gmail.com. So again, thank you, Dr. Carrie Graham, for everything. I know it has been enlightening for me. I love these because I get to learn myself, and I have been a member of training groups and a facilitator of training groups, and I know I will reevaluate and reflect on what we've talked today as I approach those in the future.
Oh, thank you so much, Josh, for the opportunity. And even for me, having these conversations, it's always a good reminder. So thank you for being a wonderful host.
Of course. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.